Vanguard!
Evil never dies. After the fall of Geese, Cray incorporated Link Joker as part of its forces, which assimilated most of Star Vaders as new allies. But 3,000 years later, and a familiar figure emerges from Brandgate from the Cardinal forces. Now that phrase becomes more important than ever. Evil never dies. Cardinal Deus Orfist is the reincarnation of Chaos Breaker Dragon, or so it seems, as this unit exhibits a lot of similar traits, but one thing's for sure, Orfist is a true assassin in the shadows, as he can cast eternal darkness on his enemies and strike them when they're most vulnerable. This is seen in his creeping darkness ability, which allows him to empower himself the moment he enters Dark Knight or even Abyssal Dark Knight. This allows Orfist to put more pressure behind his Vanguard attack, thus making his rearguard columns even more threatening as the numbers start to rise and rise the more the darkness approaches the enemies. But his true power comes around when the true darkness emerges, as he's then able to activate his Shadow of the Void ability, which allows him to create free Shadow Army tokens the moment that he enters Abyssal Dark Knight. This is a great way for Orfist to put more units onto the board, but more importantly, to put more power onto the board without losing shield value from his hand, thus being able to be a perfect balance between offense and defense. Now you might have noticed that both Orfist effects interact with the Dark Knight and Abyssal Dark Knight state. This is a state that can be acquired by playing the World Order cards in your set order zone. And you can achieve Dark Knight by having at least one World Order in play, and you can achieve Abyssal Dark Knight the moment that you have 2 or more World Orders in play. So Orfist revolves a lot around these World Orders to activate its powerful effects. So to really understand Orfist's capabilities and its true strength, let's take a look at these World Orders to get a better glimpse of what this mechanic provides to Orfist. One of the most used World Order is the Grade 2 World Order Howling Moonlit Night. This World Order allows us to draw into a new card the moment that we play this card, which is great because, as we already specified, we need to have at least 2 World Orders in play to enter the Abyssal Dark Knight state. So we want to draw as many cards from our deck as fast as possible so we can dig to these 2 specific World Orders as fast as possible. So this is a great way to increase the consistency of that engine. Besides that Grade 2, we have another Grade 2 World Order called Eclipsed Moonlight that allows us to create a Shadow Army token potentially on turn 2, which means we can be a lot more aggressive in the early game, as seen as these tokens have 15k power. And with all the different cards that interact with these tokens, you can even start an engine very early on without needing to rely on Orfist. And the final World Order that we have access to is the Grade 3 World Order In the Darkness Nobody Knows. This is the same cost as the Howling Moonlit Night, but instead of drawing a card, this allows us to retire one of our opponent's rear guards. This is great for pinpoint removal if we need to get rid of very pesky units like the Overdress cards, which gives us a lot of value, or other very important attackers like Leonard or potentially a Elden. These World Orders shows us how we can achieve the full power potential of Orfist. But Orfist also has very powerful rearguard units that interacts with tokens or potentially the Dark Knight or Abyssal Dark Knight status. One of those units being the brand new Grade 2 Cardinal Draco LV Dirt. This is a great powerful beater in the mid to late game, as it can be a solid 12k beater on turn 2, with a 8k booster can be a 20k column against a 10k Grade 2. But the following turn, if we can enter Abyssal Dark Knight, it becomes a 15k attacker, which is the same number as the tokens, thus making as powerful columns as the tokens would, because you can create 30 to 40k power columns if you Persona Ride or didn't Persona Road that turn. But on top of that, this card is also really good for overall value, because you can sack one of your tokens to retire one of your opponent's units, which can be great to get rid of more pesky units, as this particular retire effect doesn't have a condition or restriction to the unit that we can choose to retire. And at the same time, this is also great to clear your board if you're up against another deck that can also retire your units or can potentially attack your columns, like a Leonard for example. By being able to clear your back row units and your tokens, you can mitigate the amount of value you can potentially give to your opponent. Another great card for the new engine for Orfist is the brand brand new grade 1 Cardinal Fambarino. This is a great card to once again become a very powerful booster, as she can become a 23k booster if it boosts the Shadow Army token, thus creating a solid 38k column, potentially 48k column. But on top of that, you can retire the entire column to draw a card, which potentially allows you to dig through your pieces to more World Order cards if you haven't achieved the Abyssal Dark Knight status. This card interacts similarly like Elvidor, where you can clear your own board if you're up against a control deck or maybe an opponent's Leonard. But this card also interacts very nicely with Eclipse Moonlight, because the token that you create with that World Order can immediately be retired by Fambarino to draw into more cards, which not only gave you an insanely high-powered attack on turn 2, but it potentially draws you into that second World Order if you haven't done so beforehand. Another card that allows you to get a lot of value over the course of the game is the grade 2 Cardinal Fang Estrid. This is a great way to generate even more value of your tokens, because every single turn, even during your opponent's turn, you can retire one of your units and then force your opponent to also retire one of their units, thus being able to retire a buttload of cards very fast and at the same time generate more value of the tokens, because the tokens you generate don't cost you any cards from hand. So if you want to go for a more stall orientated strategy, this can be a great card to just minus your opponent over the course of a long game, because every single turn they go -1 and your -1 isn't as painful as theirs, because yours are probably going to be tokens you just generated for almost no resources. And the reason why it almost costs no resources is because we have access to the grade 1 Detonation Mutant Bulbamine. This is a great card to just generate a lot of resource, because it gives you a soul and a counterblast for just one card. And as soon as we can generate easily multiple tokens for that resources, we can fuel cards like Fambarino, like Elvidor, and even Estrid to just keep up the pressure turn after turn after turn, because we can just create tokens, use those tokens for more value, and the following turn create even more tokens thanks to cards like Bulbamine itself. The right line of Orfist is pretty much fixed, because you can only actively rely on the Orfist specific right line, because you're going to need the value and the pieces these right line cards provide to you, because this whole engine, as already explained, revolves around getting to World Orders as fast as possible and as consistently as possible. And this right line not only allows you to achieve that to some extent, but also benefit from getting that engine active as fast as possible. Because if we look at the grade 1, we see that Rodis allows us to fetch any World Order the moment it's placed on a Vanguard circle. So this gives us at least one of the 2 World Orders at all times, so we only have to get one more World Order by turn 3 to activate our entire engine the moment that we need it to be active. And the fact that we can search out any World Orders means that we can get the correct World Order that benefits us most in the scenario that we find ourselves in, thus also allowing us to play 1-offs or 2-offs of World Orders, because we can fetch them if they are very specific niches, as this card provides the consistency for playing those cards. And then if we ride up to the grade 2 in Cubicia, we can immediately get value of those orders, because our lowest graded World Order is a grade 2, so we can only play the first one on turn 2. But then immediately we'll activate this card's effect, thus giving us access to a 15k Vanguard unit, and then potentially another token if we went for the token generator, or we get more draw power, or potentially some extra value if we put more units onto the board. And because it's a 15k attacker, by putting an 8k behind it, it's immediately a very solid, powerful center column. So as we can see, this right line is very much needed to make the deck as consistent as possible, because we not only fetch at least one of the World Orders, but at the same time make our early game a bit more aggressive, thus making our turn 3 and onward pushes with the big numbers of the columns with the tokens even more devastating, because they are either already put up a lot of damage in the early game, or opponent already wasted a lot of shield to not get to high damage count as soon as turn 2. Now, the triggers themselves for Orfist is once again very similar to most decks. You can just rely on crits and fronts very easily, because you want to put a lot of pressure behind your high column numbers with your tokens, and the front triggers themselves provide with a lot of shield value with the new 20k shield. But draw triggers might also be an option, because as already explained, you need to get to your World Orders as fast as possible to put the entire engine online. But at the same time, Orfist does have a lot of cards that either provides with a lot of draw power or inherent synergy that mitigates the potential losses if you do not get into Abyssal Dark Knight immediately, especially with the new cards like Fambarino and Eclipse Moonlight still providing you with the tokens that you need to get your engine at least going. So depending on how comfortable you feel like, you can either go with no draws draws or with a couple of draws. Personally, I would play the 7 crit for front variant because I personally want to put more weight behind just having a lot of pressure behind my attacks, and I feel like running about 7 to 10 world orders in itself is already consistent enough to get into one extra world order, as since we can already draw into one from the right line itself. Now, with it all explained, let's take a look at the example deck list that I want to provide for this deck spotlight. And the deck list that I personally play right now for Orfist is this variant. So, as you can already see, we have all the key cards that we just talked about with the grade 2s and the grade 1s, all with the token interaction as well as the resource engine with Bulb Mine. But more importantly, you can immediately see I run 8 world orders. I run 6 of the grade 2s and 2 of the grade 3s. Now, the reason why I went for this particular split and also this amount of world orders is because I feel like if you between 7 or 10, you're going to have a very consistent access to 2 world orders at all times, even if you don't have the most reliable draw engine, because as you can see in this list, the only cards that draw us cards are the grade 2 world order that we have 4 copies of, and Van Marino if we can retire a token that is accessible to us with the other grade 2 world order. And the reason why it's so consistent is because you can mulligan your entire hand to at least see 1 world order, as we know for a fact that we at least are going to get one thanks to Rudis the moment that we write our grade 1. So you can see the top 10 cards of your deck before the game even begins, and there's probably going to be a world order in those 10 cards as soon as we run 8 of them. And even if that's not the case, we still have multiple turns to draw into it or drive check into it to see the second world order. And the reason why I went for these particular ones is that the 4 world order that draws you cards is probably one you're going to go into most of the time if you don't have the second world order, thus having you that 1 extra draw for more consistency. And the 2-2 splits are basically tech options because the grade 3 gives us retire if we need some pinpoint removal, and the grade 2 gives us a token if we want to be a bit more aggressive. And as seen as Rhodis allows us to fetch any world order the moment that we hit grade 1, allows us to get one of these other cards, because if we already have a world order in our hand, we don't necessarily have to opt for the grade 2 that gives us the draw, because if we already have the other grade 2 in our hand, or maybe the grade 3, we can just go for a different world order that gives us more value in early game, because if we want to go more aggressive, we can go for the grade 2 that gives us a token. If we know we need to get rid of specific units, then we can go for the grade 3, but we also need to be aware that we need to have 1 grade 2 world order and 1 grade 3 order, or 2 grade 2s, because we need to play 1 on turn 2, so we have Abyssal Dark Knight the moment that we hit grade 3. Now, as for the rest of the deck, it's very straightforward. You want to hit Abyssal Dark Knight and then create tokens with Orfist to basically put up a lot of pressure and high-powered attacks, because you want to create 30k columns every single turn, as 2 tokens themselves are 30k. Now, luckily, Elfie Dirt himself will also be a 15k, so he can also be a unit that you can put onto the field, and Van Marino can also acquire you to get to that plus 15k, but in her case even bigger, but you are going to retire the column, which is also a thing you want to keep in mind, is that you want to utilize Elfie Dirt, Van Marino, as well as Estret to clear your board in certain instances. If you're up against control matches or up against certain column attackers like Leonard, then you want to mitigate the value they can generate, and you can easily do that thanks to these cards, as they can clear your board while also generating more value, because either you draw into more cards or you force your opponent to retire more cards. Now, Orfist is relatively straightforward in play strategy, because you just want to create the tokens and just go ham with them. But thanks to the new cards, you do have some extra line of plays with either you want to clear the board or draw power, or do some extra retires, which all comes down to how you personally will play the deck and what your type of matchup is going to be. But that said, there are definitely multiple tech options that you have accessible with Orfist, which allows you to customize the deck in a specific playstyle, which is more tailored to your personal playstyle. One of those cards being a brand new grade 2 Cardinal Fang Merisma. This is effectively a more consistent way to fetch to your world orders, as this can check the top 3 and add a world order to your hand, which just increases the consistency of your deck. The only problem with this card is that it's just a vanilla 10k, so if you miss on the search, it doesn't really do anything, and even if you hit the search after that, it becomes just a vanilla unit. So you can either just intercept away with it the next turn, or you can retire it off of Estret's ability if you have an Estret on the field. Now, beyond that, we also have more resource options for Orfist if we see that we need more soul charge or counter charge. One of those cards being the grade 1 Cardinal Prima El Tepo. This is a great card that allows you to generate more soul if we need it, and as soon as it works on the Guardian Circle, it's actually really great, because as we already explained, Orfist doesn't really call a lot of cards from hand. Most of them are by generating tokens, thus saving up a lot of hand size and shield value in your hand. And with a card being able to get advantage off of that makes it even better, because now you can just guard with it and you can generate the resource you're going to need, which is a win-win situation for Orfist. But beyond it, we also have the great one, Cardinal Prima El Copa, which basically allows us to turn our tokens into countercharge, which actually is really good because, as we've seen, most tokens cost us 1 counterblast or less, because if we create a token with Eclipse Moonlight, that's 1 counterblast, and if we retire it off with this grade 1, we regain that counterblast. But in Orfist's case, we generate 3 tokens for 2 counterblasts. So if we can retire 2 of those tokens, we already refunded the entire cost of that skill, but we still have 1 of the 3 tokens left on the board, which is a net positive in resources. Now that said, it is very relatively slow if you want to go that approach, because you can only retire 1 token with 1 copy of El Copia, so that means you need to have 2 copies of her on the field to even get that fast, but it still generates more resource over the long course of the game, which can be a nice option if you want to go for that route. But besides that, we also have a couple of great freebeaters which are very good for Orfist, one of them being Lightning Thief monster Jabatil. This effectively a column attacker together with a token can be a solid 28k column, potentially 38k with Persona Ride, and being able to hit an entire column, which effectively is going to force out a lot of value off of your opponent, because you're going to retire 2 units in 1 attack. Or if they have a booster behind the Vanguard, you're going to attack and pressure the Vanguard while also retiring the backer unit, because in most situations they're not going to guard for both attacks. Which effectively is similar to a plus, but if you want to have an actual card plus, you can also go for the grade 3 Cardinal Noid Plastia. This grade 3 is somewhat similar in value wise as Jabatil, because if this card hits, you draw a card, whereas in Jabatil's case, you retire an extra unit if you can attack an entire column. Both of them are going to be a +1 in value wise, but in some instances, drawing into a card might be more beneficial, because the interesting thing about this particular grade 3 is that its ability, unlike Jabatil, doesn't really need you to be in Dark Knight or Abyssal Dark Knight. So if you can create a token with the grade 2 order, Eclipse Moonlight, and then you're able to boost this card with a token, you can still get the potential draw of the unhit and then draw into another world order, hopefully, to then get into Abyssal Dark Knight the following turn. So this can also be another way to maybe increase the consistency of your engine, on top of also still applying pressure. And there you have probably the villain of Overdress, the Orfist deck. Now, as I already explained in this video, the deck itself is relatively simple to pilot, but also, as I said in this video, there are some very important, intricate decision making that you need to make to know when you should create tokens, as well as to know when you should retire them for specific skills. And the best way to understand it and just learn it is to just play the deck as many times as possible, so you understand what happens when you do a certain action in different scenarios. I can tell you all of them, but you will probably learn more from them by just actually trying them out yourself and see it with first-hand experience what actually is going to happen with your game state once you do those decisions. So definitely go out there, try Orfist, try all these decisions, try all the options, and you will understand yourself how good this deck is and how good it is for you personally. But with it said, I'm very curious what you guys think of this Orfist deck, as well as the deck Spotlight in general, so let me know in the comments down below all your thoughts and opinions as usual. But with that said, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/FranklinInsider. You guys are amazing. If you want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/FranklinInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!